Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Let's Dev. Today we're continuing to work on Project Rebirth, a return to our very first Let's Dev project. Now last time we started working on the battle system for Project Rebirth, and indeed it was basically rock, paper, scissors, but we built it as simply the base for an even larger battle system. And today we're continuing to work on that battle system by adding our first modifier to the system, the wager mechanic. We'll not only add the ability to raise and lower the player's wager, but also the effect of wagers in battle. Well, at least a very early version of the effects of battle. So that's our plan. Now it's time to get to the coding. So before I started recording, I added the buttons to the HUD so that I wouldn't waste any precious recording time getting the placement right. So the first thing to do was set up player and enemy wagers for battle. Then it was time to make the wager buttons clickable. Much like the quote-unquote attack buttons, wager buttons are actual button objects. And since they're a lot less complicated, I could do some simple collision checks to determine which button the mouse was hovered over. The left arrow decreases the wager amount and the right arrow increases the wager amount from 0 to 5. And on a side note, yes, I shortened button to butt to save time and because I couldn't resist. Yes, sometimes I'm still a 12-year-old. After confirming this worked properly, I moved on to the action portion of the battle scene. Since we're getting more complicated with the battle system, I added a switch function to the user event. Not sure if this is exactly efficient, but hey, it works. I then added an event for the enemy to choose their own wager. I eventually realized that wagering 0 would be redundant, so I changed the minimum wager to 1 instead. And I did the same for the enemy. After switching the events around in the action event, I was ready to try and make this an actual battle system. I added new variables for both player and enemy health. The test default here is 100, but I don't anticipate that that'll be normal in the final version. But for testing purposes, we're keeping things 100. So far, our battle system is coming along, and visually it's also looking a lot more legit. So it was time to focus on results, which is why I switched the events around. There had to be consequences for each result based on the attack phase. To be completely honest, this idea is still a huge work in progress, and I'm not even confident it wouldn't be exploitable in the end. However, for now, the way I set it up was simple. Losing meant players take double the enemy's wager while only dealing half their wager. Winning meant players dealing double their wager and taking half of the enemy's wager, and drawing meant both took just the base wager. And just to make sure combatant health stayed within range, I set up clamps on both the player and enemy health. This meant I wouldn't have to constantly monitor whether or not health is going above max health or below 0. So there we had it, an early version of the base battle system for Project Rebirth. Extremely flawed, no doubt, but it was a start. But it wasn't done just yet. There has to be some restrictions to the system, of course. So I added the wager pool. This is the pool of points that the player can wager per battle. So theoretically, wagering max points each time means running the wager pool dry in no time. And much like the clamps for health, I added some code to make sure that the wager pool couldn't go below 0 and that the player wagers are restricted to the wager pool's remaining amount. And thus we had our first bit of balancing added to the battle system. Now again, this is just the start and I have no idea how I'm going to balance this properly in the end. But I do know that there are other factors still to be added, which I'll get to in a bit. But for now, I toyed with the idea of getting wager points back for winning and maybe drawing. But still, I'm almost positive this is still exploitable somehow, and I'll need to somehow figure out the math to making it work in the long run. Now, as I said, I do have plans for adding other modifiers to this system. There will be healing items for sure, but I'm also thinking about maybe adding a card system or something that can alter the rules somehow. You know, something that'll diversify gameplay and make the battle system more interesting. But again, that'll all come in due time because I'm still not exactly 100% on the system yet. Because as much as I can see this working in my head, in actual practice, it might not work and I may end up resorting to something simpler or completely different. But the silver lining is we've now constructed a nice base for a turn-based battle system, which I'm ultimately aiming for. Anyway, that about does it for this episode of Let's Dev. While it may not seem like much, I'm just happy things are working right for once. And hopefully that'll continue in the future. But anyway, remember that if you like this video or enjoy Let's Dev in general, be sure to hit that like button. If you aren't already subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button and be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. And as always, be sure to leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.